Kodak can see the writing on the wall. It says there is substantial doubt the company, deep in debt, will survive.
Kodak was started by George Eastman in 1888. He made up the name Kodak. He liked the letter K.
Kodak brought photography to the masses with brownie box cameras and later the Instamatic.
Who among us doesn't recognize the name Kodak? For decades, it was there at birthdays, weddings, family reunions, quietly capturing the moments that mattered most. If you grew up flipping through photo albums, there's a good chance Kodak was behind those memories. But behind that familiar yellow box was something much bigger. At its peak, Kodak wasn't just a camera company. It was a global giant, over 100,000 employees, operations around the world, and at one point, even a nuclear reactor running at its headquarters. This was a company with the scale, resources, and talent to rival entire governments. And yet, in 2012, Kodak filed for bankruptcy. Here's the twist. Kodak didn't miss the future. They invented it. In 1976, a Kodak engineer built the world's first digital camera, the very technology that would eventually replace film. Started inside Kodak itself. So that raises a strange question. How does a company invent the future and still lose to it? Most people think they know the answer. Digital cameras killed Kodak. Simple as that. But the reality is more complicated and honestly, more interesting. Kodak didn't fail because of technology. It failed because its business model and internal incentives made adapting to that technology incredibly difficult. In this story, we'll break down what Kodak actually was, why film was so powerful, why digital was ignored, how incentives blocked change, and why a competitor like Fujifilm survived the exact same disruption. Because sometimes companies don't fail because they didn't see the future. They fail because they couldn't afford to act on it. If you want to see how Kodak captured the world, then shot itself into collapse, hit like and subscribe, and let's decode it together here on Money Decoded. If you strip Kodak down to its core, the story starts to look very different from what most people expect. Because Kodak wasn't really a camera company. It was a film company. The cameras were just the hook, the thing that got you in the door. The real business began after you pressed the button. Every roll of film you bought, every photo you developed, every print you made. That's where Kodak made its money. The moment you captured a memory, Kodak captured revenue. They had built what's known as the razor and blade model. Sell the razor cheap, make money on the blades. Kodak did the same thing. Make cameras accessible, then earn massive profits on film. And those profits were no joke. Film had margins of around 80%. By the mid-1970s, Kodak controlled nearly 90% of the film market in the United States. Think about that for a second. Almost every photo taken, every birthday, every graduation, every awkward family portrait was quietly sending money back to Kodak. Every click was cash. So naturally the question becomes, why would they ever want that to change? Kodak wasn't just big, it was deeply embedded. The company controlled huge parts of its own ecosystem, from sourcing materials to manufacturing to distribution. It was vertically integrated to a level where the entire operation functioned like a well-oiled machine built over decades. It's like owning both the printer and the ink, and realizing the ink is where all the profit is. As long as people kept printing photos, Kodak didn't just win, it dominated. And for a long time, that system worked beautifully, almost too beautifully, because when digital photography started to emerge, it didn't just introduce a new product, it quietly threatened to eliminate the entire reason.
Good evening, Matt. On paper, this appears grim for the Eastman Kodak company, but financial experts in the company itself believe it will have enough cash to pay off its debt. However, concerns remain about its future.
There is substantial doubt about its ability to continue as a going concern.
Kodak made money in the first place. No film, no processing, no repeat purchases, no engine. And that's the key realization. Kodak wasn't trying to protect cameras. It was protecting a profit machine that had been printing money for decades. This wasn't a company built to constantly reinvent itself anymore. It was built to preserve something that worked extremely well. And when your entire system is optimized for the present, changing it starts to feel less like innovation and more like self-destruction. In 1976, something remarkable happened inside Kodak, something that would define the company's future. Kodak had built its dominance step by step. It started with roll film cameras that made photography accessible to everyday people. Then came the Brownie, a cheap, easy-to-use camera that put photography into millions of hands. Over time, Kodak refined the entire experience. Better film, faster processing, more reliable prints. Each improvement strengthened the same system. Take photos, buy film, develop film, repeat. And it worked flawlessly. By the 1970s, Kodak had become a near monopoly in photography. The system was polished, profitable, and deeply embedded into everyday life. And then, inside that very system, something unexpected appeared. A Kodak engineer named Steve Sasson built the world's first digital camera. It didn't look like the future. It was bulky, about the size of a toaster. The image quality was low, and it took over 20 seconds just to capture a single photo. But the idea behind it was revolutionary. For the first time, a photograph could exist without film. No chemicals, no physical development. Just an image captured and displayed electronically. When Sasson demonstrated it to Kodak executives, they weren't just seeing a strange new device. They were seeing a completely different way the world could work. They weren't looking at a prototype, they were looking at the end of their business model. So why didn't they go all in? Kodak didn't ignore digital photography. They understood it. They studied it. Their conclusion was clear. Digital was coming, but not immediately. So they chose to wait, and from their perspective, it made perfect sense. Film was generating around 80% margins. It was one of the most profitable products in the world. Digital photography, on the other hand, was early, low quality, and far less profitable. Why replace a machine that prints money with something worse today? That's where the real conflict begins. The stronger Kodak became, the harder it was to change. The system that powered its rise was now quietly limiting its ability to adapt. Kodak saw the future clearly, but acting on that future required sacrificing the present, and that was a much harder decision to make. What makes Kodak's story so compelling isn't that people inside the company were blind to change, it's that almost everyone was acting rationally. From the outside, it's easy to say they should have pivoted. But inside the company, the incentives told a very different story. Executives were judged on short-term performance, quarterly earnings, yearly growth, stock price stability. Managers were rewarded based on revenue targets and operational success, often tied directly to bonuses. The board's responsibility was to protect shareholder value in the present, not gamble on uncertain futures decades away. So ask yourself, who exactly gets rewarded for destroying the company's most profitable business? The answer is simple: no one. Choosing to fully embrace digital photography didn't just mean launching a new product. It meant actively undermining the very system that was generating billions in profit. It meant shrinking revenues in the short term, risking investor backlash, and potentially destabilizing the entire organization. And this wasn't a small, nimble company. Kodak had over 100,000 employees. It was deeply vertically integrated with massive infrastructure built around film. Factories, supply chains, processing plants, distribution networks. Entire careers, departments, and operations depended on that system continuing to run. You're not just changing a product. You're dismantling an entire machine. This is what's known as the innovator's dilemma. The very things that make a company successful, its processes, its incentives, its focus on efficiency, also make it incredibly difficult to adapt when a disruptive technology emerges. Especially when that new technology initially looks worse and less profitable. It's like trying to replace your best-selling product with something inferior, before you're actually forced to. Kodak did try to respond. They experimented with digital cameras, invested in new technologies, and even gained some market share, but these efforts were often half-steps. They tried to fit digital into their existing business model, treating it like film, expecting people to print photos and hoping it would eventually match the same profit structure. But digital didn't behave that way, and that's the key realization. Kodak's system wasn't built to adapt, it was built to protect what already worked. They didn't fail to react. They saw the change, They moved toward it. They even participated in it. They just never fully committed. By the early 2000s, everything Kodak had been expecting finally started happening. Digital photography took off. Cameras got better, storage got cheaper, and people stopped printing photos. Instead of albums, photos lived on screens. And as that shift accelerated, film sales began to drop. The problem was, Kodak was still built around film. They had factories, systems, and entire operations tied to a business that was slowly shrinking. Even as digital grew, they couldn't just walk away. Film was still their main source of money. So they were stuck. As revenue from film declined, Kodak had less flexibility. And with less flexibility came worse decisions. Instead of making bold moves, they tried to hold things together. They made acquisitions that didn't really fit. They sold off strong parts of the business just to stay afloat. And they kept misreading digital, still thinking people would print photos instead of keeping them online. They weren't running out of ideas. They were running out of time. So what happens when your main profit engine disappears and nothing replaces it? The answer was slow and painful. Kodak cut tens of thousands of jobs. They shut down plants. Losses kept piling up. And in 2012, after more than a century, Kodak went bankrupt. It didn't happen all at once. It was a slow squeeze. Less revenue, fewer options, and too little time to fix it. Kodak wasn't alone. Every camera company faced the same disruption. Film was dying. Digital was rising. Some, like Canon and Sony, adapted. Others got wiped out by smartphones. But Fujifilm did something different. They didn't try to save film. They asked a harder question. What are we actually good at? The answer wasn't cameras, it was chemistry and imaging, so they rebuilt the company around it. Healthcare, cosmetics, advanced materials. They didn't defend the past, they replaced it. Kodak protected what it had. Fujifilm let it go, and in disruption, that's the difference between survival and collapse. Kodak saw the future. They just couldn't bring themselves to follow it. What company do you think is making that same mistake right now? Drop it in the comments. Thanks for watching. If you actually enjoy being part of this decoding circle, you already know what to do. Hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.